They ruled vast empires, commanded armies, and lived lives of unimaginable luxury. But behind the crowns and coronations were bodies quietly falling apart. A king who laughed himself into madness. A child prince whose rare blood disorder helped bring down an empire. And a dynasty so obsessed with keeping power in the family that it bred itself into extinction. These weren't just medical curiosities. They were ticking time bombs that reshaped history. Because when your bloodline rules the world, a single defective gene can start a revolution. Let's start with the disease so infamous it literally became known as the royal disease. Hemophilia, a genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly. One paper cut could turn fatal. A bruise could mean internal bleeding. It started quietly, with Queen Victoria of England. She wasn't sick herself, but she carried the mutated gene. And when you're the matriarch of Europe's most powerful dynasty, your bloodline doesn't stop at the Channel. Victoria had 9 children. They married into nearly every major royal house across Europe. And with them, the disease spread. Her son Leopold bled to death at 30 after a minor fall. Her grandsons, princes of Spain, Germany, and Russia, carried the same genetic time bomb. But the most famous victim, Tsarevich Alexei Romanov, heir to the Russian throne. Alexei's mother, Tsarina Alexandra, was Victoria's granddaughter. She adored her son, but lived in terror of his next injury. A scrape, a stumble, any could be fatal. The court kept his illness secret. A Russian heir couldn't be seen as weak, especially when revolution was already brewing outside palace walls. When Alexei suffered internal bleeding, the royal family turned to a mysterious, holy man, Grigory Rasputin. He wasn't a doctor, he wasn't even clean. But somehow, Rasputin's presence seemed to calm the boy and stop the bleeding. Modern historians think they know why. Rasputin ordered doctors to stop giving Alexei aspirin, a brand new miracle drug that unfortunately thins the blood. So the mad monk might have accidentally saved the prince's life, at least temporarily. But Rasputin's growing influence over the royal family poisoned public opinion. To the people, he was a hypnotic fraud manipulating the Tsarina. To the nobility, he was a symbol of rot at the heart of the empire. When the revolution came in 1917, the royal family's downfall was complete. And you could argue, it began with a single gene in Queen Victoria's blood. A century of empires undone by DNA. Not all royal diseases were physical. Some were far more colourful. King George III of Britain is remembered for losing America. But before he lost the colonies, he lost something more important, his mind. In 1788, George began rambling for hours. He spoke so fast his words blurred together. He didn't sleep. He shouted nonsense at courtiers. And during one famous episode, he tried to shake hands with a tree, convinced it was the King of Prussia. Doctors had no idea what was wrong. Some called it divine punishment. Others whispered about witchcraft, stress, or inbreeding. Modern researchers believe it was porphyria, a rare disorder that affects the body's ability to make hemoglobin. It causes severe pain, hallucinations, and purple-tinged urine, hence the nickname the Purple King. At the time, though, nobody knew that. They just knew their ruler had gone spectacularly mad. George's son, the future George IV, seized power as regent. Court gossip exploded. Political cartoons mocked the mad king, and the monarchy's image never fully recovered. Ironically, George lived to old age, blind, senile, and unaware that his mental collapse had helped redefine how Britain viewed royal power. He became the first monarch treated as a patient, not a god. A shift that quietly helped Britain evolve into the constitutional monarchy we know today. All because one king's neurons went rogue. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, ruled for 72 years, the longest in European history. He was glorious, radiant, divine. Also, he smelled horrific. Louis suffered from chronic anal fistulas, infected abscesses caused by sitting for hours in elaborate wigs and brocade trousers while pretending to be Apollo. By 1686, the pain was unbearable. He couldn't ride, sit, or even stand comfortably. So his surgeons decided to perform a revolutionary new procedure. They cut open the king's posterior and invented fistula surgery. Without anaesthesia. Courtiers celebrated by holding parties in honour of His Majesty's successful operation. For months afterward, nobles lined up to show solidarity by getting unnecessary fistula surgeries themselves, because nothing says loyalty like elective butt surgery. Louis's successful recovery turned him into a medical trendsetter. Operation Fever swept the court, and while his ego survived intact, his personal hygiene did not. Doctors warned him against bathing, believing water spread disease. So instead of washing, Louis changed clothes. A lot. He reportedly owned over 300 wigs and dozens of perfume varieties, because when you don't bathe, you compensate with fashion. His health issues didn't kill him, but they symbolised everything rotten about royal image. A body falling apart, covered by luxury, perfume, and denial. If Louis XIV's France smelled bad, Henry VIII's England was downright infectious. Henry started his reign as the Golden Renaissance king, athletic, handsome, the ideal monarch. By his 40s, he was an obese, paranoid, ulcerated mess. Historians long blamed syphilis. It fits the tabloid fantasy, the lustful king punished for excess. But evidence suggests something else, possibly diabetes, or a traumatic brain injury from a jousting accident. Either way, his personality changed dramatically. The charming prince became a violent tyrant who executed wives, friends, and advisors by the dozen. The once dashing figure now needed mechanical hoists to move him. His ulcerated legs oozed pus, so foul courtiers gagged when he entered the room. His temper became volcanic. Henry's court was obsessed with heirs, and his potential infertility only made the pressure worse. In trying to secure the Tudor bloodline, he practically destroyed it. So whether it was syphilis, infection, or head trauma, the outcome was the same. The king's illness became policy. His paranoia created religious schisms, political purges, and the birth of the Church of England. One man's body reshaped an entire faith. For sheer biological disaster, though, no dynasty beats the Habsburgs. From Spain to Austria, the Habsburgs ruled Europe for centuries, and almost always married their cousins. The result? One of history's most grotesque genetic legacies. By the 1600s, Habsburg portraits all shared a signature feature, the Habsburg jaw, a massive underbite caused by generations of inbreeding. The most tragic case was Charles II of Spain, known to historians as the Bewitched. Charles was physically deformed, intellectually disabled, and chronically ill. He had an enormous jaw, could barely chew, and his tongue was so swollen he spoke in a lisp. He didn't walk until age 8 or speak until 4. Doctors described him as short, weak, and pitifully ugly. And yet, he was king. Charles's illnesses weren't just personal tragedy, they were geopolitical catastrophe. He was the last of his line, unable to produce heirs. When he died at 39, childless and broken, the Spanish Empire imploded into the War of Spanish Succession, a continent-wide crisis sparked by one man's chromosomes. Genetic analysis confirms it. Charles II's parents were uncle and niece, and his family tree was more a circle than a branch. The dynasty had literally bred itself into extinction. If ever proof existed that power shouldn't be hereditary, it's that. A century later, France got another case study in inherited misfortune. Louis XVI, the last king before the Revolution. He wasn't cruel or insane, just painfully awkward, shy, indecisive, and plagued by a medical condition that became court gossip for years. Phimosis, a foreskin malformation that made intercourse difficult. For 7 years, he and Queen Marie Antoinette failed to consummate their marriage. Pamphleteers mocked them mercilessly. The King of France who couldn't perform his royal duty. Eventually, Louis underwent corrective surgery, the 18th century version of a viral scandal. And while the operation was successful, the damage was already done. His failure to project virility made him a punchline. And in a monarchy built on divine masculinity, that was fatal. When revolution came, the king's body, once symbolic of power, became a target. It wasn't just that he lost his throne, he literally lost his head. In China, royal disease took on an alchemical twist. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, wanted to live forever. So his physicians prescribed him the best immortality medicine they had: mercury. He consumed mercury pills, mercury wine, and mercury-laced elixirs daily. Unsurprisingly, the man who built the Great Wall ended up building himself an early grave. In his final years, he was paranoid, trembling, and hallucinating. Some accounts say his skin turned greyish-blue, classic mercury poisoning. He sent expeditions searching for the islands of the immortals. None returned. He died at 49, leaving behind a mausoleum filled with terracotta soldiers and pools of actual mercury, meant to mimic rivers in the afterlife. In his obsession with immortality, he achieved the opposite. A death so toxic, no one could open his tomb without dying too. Across cultures, royal health wasn't just private, it was propaganda. If a monarch was strong, the state looked strong. If he was weak, rivals pounced. That's why illnesses were hidden, minimised, or outright denied. Louis XV's doctors downplayed his smallpox until it literally erupted across his face. Charles VI of France believed he was made of glass and refused to be touched. Ivan the Terrible's outbursts in Russia may have been fueled by mercury-laced medicine as well. Every cough became a crisis of state, every symptom a potential rebellion. Because when your body represents divine order, even your nosebleeds can shake an empire. By the 19th century, medical science began catching up, but royal denial remained. Queen Victoria's descendants carried haemophilia through generations, proving that privilege can't buy immunity. King George's madness foreshadowed modern psychiatry. The Habsburg jaw became a warning about genetic arrogance. For centuries, monarchs called themselves chosen by God. But in the end, they were ruled by the same fragile biology as everyone else. And sometimes, that biology ruled history. Empires rise and fall on grand ideas: conquest, religion, revolution. But beneath those forces are beating hearts, diseased, delusional, or doomed by DNA. The story of the royal disease isn't just about sick kings. It's about the illusion of perfection collapsing under the weight of human flesh. Every royal illness, from bleeding princes to mad monarchs, pulled back the curtain on the truth. Power doesn't make you divine. It just gives your suffering a bigger stage. So the next time you picture a gleaming crown, remember, behind every jewel is a bloodstream full of secrets. Because history's most powerful people weren't undone by enemies. They were undone by themselves.